Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel UES Frontier and watched the massive alien ship appear on their screens. The ship was 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built, and it gleamed like polished silver against the black space. His crew fell silent as they stared at the enormous vessel that had just dropped out of hyperspace right in front of them. Communications Officer Lisa Park turned to Jake with wide eyes. "Captain, they're sending a message." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed a tall alien figure with pale blue skin and silver hair. The being wore elaborate robes covered in strange symbols and spoke in a voice that sounded like music. "I am High Chancellor Vextai of the Zephyrian Empire. You are in the presence of Her Royal Highness Princess Lyra Lay, heir to the throne of 17 star systems. Prepare your vessel for boarding and present your tribute to show proper respect." Jake looked around at his crew. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Lieutenant Sam Carter just waited for orders. Lisa Park looked nervous but ready. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Frontier. We're honored to meet you. Princess Lyra Lay is welcome aboard our ship. We don't have tribute, but we'd be happy to share some coffee and discuss peaceful relations between our peoples." The alien chancellor looked shocked. His mouth opened and closed several times before he could speak again. "You dare to invite royalty to your vessel? The princess does not visit lesser beings. You will come to her." Jake smiled politely. "With respect, we're explorers, not servants. If the princess wants to meet, she's welcome here as our guest. If not, we'll be on our way." Danny Rodriguez grinned and whispered, "That's telling them, Captain." The transmission cut off and Jake waited. He had no idea what these aliens would do next, but he wasn't going to bow down to anyone just because they claimed to be royal. His crew stood behind him quietly, and he felt proud of their calm courage. 20 minutes later, a smaller ship detached from the alien vessel and approached the frontier. Jake went to the docking bay with his senior officers to greet their visitors. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and 3 figures stepped through. The first was clearly a guard, tall and muscular with some kind of energy weapon at his side. The second was the chancellor they had spoken with, still looking offended by Jake's invitation. The third figure made Jake catch his breath. Princess Lorelei was beautiful in a way that seemed almost impossible. Her skin was the color of moonlight, and her silver hair flowed like water. Her eyes were deep purple and seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. She wore a simple white dress that somehow looked more elegant than any royal gown Jake had ever seen in movies. But what struck him most was how she moved. Every step was perfect, every gesture controlled. She looked around the docking bay with sharp intelligence, taking in every detail of human technology. "Your Highness, welcome aboard the Frontier," Jake said with a respectful nod. Princess Lyra Lay stared at him for a long moment. In her culture, lesser beings always knelt when meeting royalty. This human captain stood straight and looked her directly in the eyes as if they were equals. "You are Captain Morrison," she said. Her voice was like silver bells. "I am. These are my officers, Chief Engineer Rodriguez, Communications Officer Park, and my aide, Lieutenant Carter. We're pleased to meet you." The princess looked at each human in turn. They all stood straight and nodded politely, but none of them showed the fear or worship she was used to seeing. "Show me your ship," she commanded. "Of course. Right this way," Jake led the group through the corridors of the Frontier. He pointed out various systems and explained how things worked. Princess Lyrelay asked detailed technical questions that surprised everyone. She knew more about starship engineering than most of Jake's crew. In the conference room, Jake had coffee and snacks waiting. He pulled out a chair for the princess and gestured for everyone to sit. The Chancellor looked horrified that his princess would sit at the same table as aliens. "Tell me about your empire," Jake said, pouring coffee for everyone. 17 star system sounds impressive. Princess Lyrelay accepted the coffee and tasted it carefully. Her eyes widened slightly with pleasure. "This beverage is excellent. What do you call it?" "Coffee. It's made from beans we grow on several of our worlds. Would you like the recipe?" The princess looked confused. "Recipe? You would share this freely?" "Of course. We believe good things should be shared." Danny Rodriguez leaned forward. "Captain, maybe we should ask about their technology too. Fair trade and all." Jake nodded. "Danny's right. If you're willing to share information about your faster-than-light drives, we could learn from each other." Princess Lyrelay watched this exchange with fascination. In her empire, no one would dare interrupt royal negotiations or suggest changes to diplomatic strategy. Yet this captain listened to his subordinate and even agreed with him. "Your crew speaks freely," she observed. "They're not just crew, they're advisors. Each of them knows things I don't. Danny understands our engines better than anyone. Lisa knows 17 languages. Sam has studied more alien cultures than our entire diplomatic corps. I'd be stupid not to listen to them." The princess had never heard a leader admit to not knowing everything. In Zephyrian culture, admitting ignorance was a sign of weakness. "Tell me about your leadership structure," she said. Jake explained how human crews worked together, how decisions were made through discussion and consensus when possible. He talked about Earth's democratic governments and how leaders were chosen by the people they served. "Leaders serve the people," Princess Lyrelay repeated slowly. "Not the other way around. That's the idea. A good leader helps others succeed. The best leaders are the ones who make everyone around them better." The princess sat quietly for several minutes, thinking about this strange concept. Finally, she spoke. "Captain Morrison, why do your people not fear us? Our technology is superior. Our empire spans 17 worlds. We have conquered every species we have encountered." Jake sipped his coffee and considered the question carefully. "Fear doesn't solve problems. Understanding does. Maybe your technology is better than ours right now, but we're always learning and improving. Maybe your empire is bigger, but size isn't everything. The way I see it, we can either be enemies and waste time fighting, or we can be friends and both become stronger." Princess Lyrelay stared at this strange human captain who spoke of friendship, with an empire that could destroy his entire species. In her long life, she had never met anyone quite like him. Princess Lyrelay returned to her flagship with her mind spinning from the encounter with the humans. She had met representatives from dozens of species over the years, and they all followed the same pattern. They either submitted immediately out of fear, or they tried to fight and were quickly defeated. The humans did neither. She walked through the crystal corridors of her ship toward her private chambers. High Chancellor Vextai hurried beside her, clearly upset by what had happened. "Your Highness, these humans show dangerous disrespect. We should demonstrate proper Zephyrian authority. A few destroyed ships would teach them their place." Princess Lyrelay stopped walking and looked at her advisor. Vexatai, what did you think of their technology? Primitive compared to ours, Princess. Their weapons are basic energy beams. Their shields are weak. Their ship is barely capable of faster-than-light travel. And yet Captain Morrison was not afraid of us. Why, Vextai frowned. Ignorance, Highness. They do not understand our power. The princess continued to her chambers and dismissed her guards. She stood at the large window that looked out at the human ship and thought about Jake Morrison's strange words. Fear doesn't solve problems. Understanding does. In the Zephyrian Empire, fear was the foundation of order. Lower castes feared higher castes. Subjects feared rulers. Enemies feared the Empire's military might. It had worked for thousands of years, but these humans operated differently. She had watched Captain Morrison's crew during their meeting. They spoke freely, offered suggestions, even disagreed with their captain. Yet when he made decisions, they followed without question. It was not fear that motivated them, but something else entirely. Princess Lyrelai activated her personal computer and began researching human culture. The data files from previous encounters were limited but revealing. Humans had spent centuries fighting among themselves before finally uniting under a democratic world government. They chose their leaders through elections. They had laws that protected individual rights even against government power. The more she read, the more puzzled she became. How could a species survive without strong hierarchical control? How could leaders maintain authority if anyone could challenge them? How could order exist without fear? Meanwhile, on the human ship, Jake Morrison faced his own challenges. The communication array crackled to life with urgent messages from Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on the screen looking stern and worried. Captain Morrison, what the hell are you doing out there? We're receiving reports that you invited alien royalty onto your ship like they were tourists. Jake stood at attention. Admiral, we're conducting first contact protocols as outlined in the exploration manual. The aliens appear peaceful and interested in dialogue. Peaceful? Jake, these are the Zephyrians. Intelligence reports say they've conquered 17 star systems. They don't do peaceful. With respect, Admiral, maybe no one ever tried talking. To them like equals before. Admiral Hayes rubbed her forehead. Captain, I'm ordering you to secure a non-aggression pact immediately. Use whatever methods necessary. The Colonial Council is breathing down my neck about expanding human territory, and we can't afford a war with a superior alien force. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to find his senior staff waiting for him. Danny Rodriguez spoke first. Captain, the Admiral wants us to kiss alien boots to avoid a fight. That's not exactly how she put it. Danny Lisa Park stepped forward. Sir, I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. Their language has 17 different words for types of submission and only 3 words for cooperation. Their entire culture seems built on dominance hierarchies, Lieutenant Sam Carter added. The princess seemed genuinely surprised by how we interact with each other. Maybe showing them a different way of doing things could be more effective than traditional diplomacy? Jake nodded. That's what I'm thinking too. But Admiral Hayes wants results and the Colonial Council wants expansion rights. We're caught between competing interests. So what do we do, Captain? Danny asked. We do what we always do. We figure it out together. 3. Days later, Princess Lyrelai requested another meeting. This time she came alone, except for 2 guards who remained outside the conference room. Jake welcomed her with the same respectful courtesy as before. Princess, thank you for coming back. I hope you've been well. I have been studying your species, Captain Morrison. I find humans confusing. Jake smiled. We confuse ourselves sometimes. 2. What puzzles you? Your government structure makes no sense. How can leaders maintain control if citizens can simply vote them out of power? That's the point. Leaders who serve the people well get to keep leading. Leaders who don't get replaced. It keeps everyone honest. Princess Lyrelei sat quietly for a moment. I have a proposal for you, Captain. The Zephyrian Empire will grant humans safe passage through our territory. In exchange, we want your agricultural techniques. Jake was surprised. Our farming methods? Why? Your crop yields are remarkable. A single human colony world produces more food than 3 Zephyrian agricultural planets. Our population is growing and we need better ways to feed our people. That seems like a fair trade. But I'll need to discuss it with my crew and get approval from Earth Command. The princess watched as Jake called his officers together. She observed their discussion with growing fascination. Each person contributed ideas and concerns. Jake listened to every suggestion, asked questions, and gradually built consensus around a proposal. When Admiral Hayes appeared on the communication screen, the entire senior staff participated in the briefing. They presented options, discussed risks, and recommended a course of action. The Admiral asked tough questions, but ultimately agreed to the trade proposal. After the transmission ended, Princess Lyrelei spoke quietly. Captain, why do you seek input from so many people? Does it not slow down decision-making? Sometimes. But decisions made by groups are usually better than decisions made by individuals. Everyone sees things differently. When we combine different perspectives, we get better solutions. In my empire, seeking advice is seen as weakness. A strong ruler knows what to do without consultation. Jake poured fresh coffee for both of them. Maybe, but I've found that admitting what I don't know makes me a better leader. My crew respects me more when I ask for help, not less. The princess considered this carefully. You said respect, not fear. Fear and respect are different things. Fear makes people obey because they have to. Respect makes people follow because they want to. Which do you think creates better results? Princess Lyrelei had no answer for that question. In her entire life, no one had ever followed her orders because they wanted to. They obeyed because they had to. Over the next several hours, Jake explained human leadership philosophy in detail. He talked about earning trust through competence and fairness. He described how good leaders developed other leaders instead of keeping all power for themselves. He explained how admitting mistakes actually increased credibility, rather than destroying it. As the meeting concluded, Princess Lyrelei made an unprecedented decision. Captain Morrison, I would like to invite you to visit the Zephyrian homeworld as my personal guest. You would be the first alien to see our capital city. Jake was honored but surprised. That's a generous offer, Princess. May I ask why? Princess Lyrelei looked directly into his eyes. Because I want to understand how humans create loyalty without fear. I want to learn about this respect you speak of. And I think my father, the Emperor, should meet someone who leads through service rather than dominance. Jake accepted the invitation, not knowing it would change both their species forever. Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of Princess Lyrelei's personal transport ship and watched the Zephyrian homeworld grow larger as they approached. The planet was a blue-green jewel surrounded by dozens of orbital stations and defense platforms. The technology on display was breathtaking and far beyond anything humans had achieved. Lieutenant Sam Carter stood beside him, equally amazed by what they were seeing. As Jake's aide and cultural specialist, Sam had studied every piece of available information about Zephyrian society during their 3-day journey to the homeworld. Captain, remember that eye contact with anyone above your perceived social rank could be considered an insult. Also, accepting food or drink before it's offered 3 times is seen as greedy. Jake nodded but felt uncomfortable with the complex social rules. On human ships and colonies, people were judged by their actions and contributions, not by arbitrary rankings assigned at birth. Princess Lirelai approached them as they prepared for landing. She had been quiet during most of the journey, clearly thinking deeply about something. Jake had tried to engage her in conversation several times, but she seemed lost in thought. Captain Morrison, I must warn you about something. My people will expect you to show proper deference to higher castes. This includes my father, the Emperor. I have explained that humans have different customs, but some of my advisors may still be offended by your behavior. I understand, Princess. I'll be respectful, but I won't pretend to be something I'm not. The princess looked troubled. That is what worries me. The transport landed at the Royal Spaceport, a magnificent structure of crystal and metal that sparkled in the light of the system's twin suns. Jake and Sam followed Princess Lirelai down the ramp and into a world unlike anything they had ever imagined. The Zephyrian capital city stretched to the horizon, filled with impossible spires that seemed to grow from the ground like living things. Vehicles floated silently through the air, and citizens moved through the streets in perfect order. Everything was beautiful and efficient, and somehow completely lifeless. What struck Jake most forcefully was the behavior of the people they passed. When Princess Lirelai walked by, everyone stopped what they were doing and bowed deeply. They remained in that position until she had passed completely. No one looked at her directly, and conversation ceased entirely when she approached. At the royal palace, an enormous structure of blue crystal and silver metal, hundreds of servants and courtiers lined the corridors. Each one bowed as the princess passed. Jake noticed their faces showed no joy or warmth, only careful attention to proper protocol. Princess, do these people always act this way around you? Jake asked quietly. This is normal behavior in the presence of royalty. They show proper respect. But don't you ever just talk to them? Ask how they're doing or what they think about things. Princess. Lirelai looked confused. Why would I do that? They are servants. Their thoughts are not relevant to matters of state. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the palace's cool temperature. These weren't people serving a leader they believed in. They were frightened individuals going through motions to avoid punishment. The throne room was the most magnificent space Jake had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above, and the walls were covered with precious stones that caught and reflected light in dazzling patterns. At the far end, on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond, sat Emperor Zethkar. The Emperor was an imposing figure even by Zephyrian standards. His silver hair was streaked with blue, and his purple eyes held the weight of absolute authority. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the vast chamber. So you are the human captain who speaks to my daughter as an equal. Jake walked forward and stopped at what seemed like a reasonable distance. He did not bow, but gave a respectful nod. Your Majesty, I'm honored to meet you. Thank you for welcoming me to your world. A murmur ran through the assembled courtiers. Several guards tensed and placed hands on their weapons. No one had ever addressed the Emperor without first prostrating themselves. Emperor Zethkar raised a hand for silence. He studied Jake with obvious curiosity. "You do not bow." "With respect, Your Majesty, I bow to no one. But I show respect to those who earn it through their actions and wisdom." The Emperor's eyes widened slightly. In 300 years of rule, no one had ever spoken to him so directly. "And you believe I have not earned your respect?" "I don't know you well enough yet to make that judgment, sir. But your daughter speaks of you with genuine affection, not just duty. That suggests you're more than just a ruler to her." Princess Lyrelai watched this exchange with her heart pounding. Jake was either very brave or very foolish, possibly both. Emperor Zethkar stood from his throne and walked down to where Jake waited. The two leaders faced each other as equals, much to everyone's shock. "Tell me, Captain Morrison, how does one earn respect in human society? By serving others, by making good decisions that benefit everyone, not just yourself, by admitting when you're wrong and learning from mistakes, by treating people fairly regardless of where they come from. And if someone fails to show you proper respect, then I try to understand why. Maybe they have good reasons to be upset. Maybe I've done something wrong, or maybe they're just having a bad day and need patience rather than punishment." The Emperor turned to his daughter. "Lyrelai, show our guest to his quarters. Tomorrow we will continue this interesting conversation." That evening, Princess Lyrelai gave Jake a private tour of the palace gardens. The crystal formations and exotic plants were beautiful, but Jake found himself more interested in the maintenance workers he glimpsed in distant corners. They wore simple gray clothing and kept their eyes downcast whenever anyone of higher rank appeared. "Princess, what happens to those workers when they get old or sick? They are replaced with younger, healthier workers. What happens to the old ones? They return to the lower city districts. Why do you ask?" Jake stopped walking and faced her. "On human worlds, we take care of people who've spent their lives serving others. They get pensions, health care, housing. They're honored for their contributions. But they are lower caste. Their purpose is to serve. Their purpose is to live full lives just like everyone else. They have families, dreams, hopes. They matter just as much as anyone else." Princess Lyrelai had never thought about servants as individuals with their own desires and needs. In Zephyrian society, your caste determined your entire life. Lower castes existed to serve higher castes. It was the natural order. But Jake's words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. If these workers were people just like her, with thoughts and feelings and dreams, then what gave her the right to treat them as less than human? The next morning brought a crisis that would test everything Jake had said about leadership and respect. A group of lower caste workers had organized a protest demanding better working conditions and the right to change careers. In traditional Zephyrian society, such defiance meant immediate punishment. Emperor Zethkar summoned Jake to observe how true authority dealt with rebellion. The protesters were brought before the throne in chains, their leaders facing exile or worse. Jake watched the proceedings with growing dismay. These weren't dangerous criminals. They were people asking for basic dignity and opportunity. When the Emperor asked for his opinion, Jake took a deep breath and spoke truth to power. "Your Majesty, these people aren't your enemies. They're asking for the chance to contribute more than just manual labor. Why not listen to what they have to say?" The suggestion shocked everyone present. Listen to lower caste complaints? Consider changing ancient traditions? It was unthinkable. but Princess Lyra Lai surprised everyone, including herself, by stepping forward. "Father, perhaps Captain Morrison has a point. What harm could come from hearing their concerns?" As Jake watched the princess speak up for people she had never considered as individuals before, he realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is ask the right questions and trust others to find their own answers. Princess Lorelei sat in her private chambers that night, unable to sleep. The day's events had shaken her understanding of everything she had been taught about leadership and society. She had watched Jake Morrison speak with the protesters not as a superior addressing inferiors, but as one person trying to understand others. When Jake suggested that the Emperor listen to the workers' concerns, Lorelei had felt something she had never experienced before. It was the desire to speak up for people who could not speak for themselves. The feeling was so strong that she had surprised herself by supporting Jake's suggestion in front of the entire court. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Princess Lorelei opened the door to find Jake standing in the corridor. He looked tired but determined. "Princess, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to talk about what happened today. Please, come in. I have been thinking about it as well." Jake entered the elegant chamber and accepted her invitation to sit. The furniture was beautiful but somehow cold, like everything else in the palace. Even the princess's private space felt formal and unwelcoming. "Princess, can I ask you something personal?" "You may ask. Are you happy?" The question caught her completely off guard. In Zephyrian culture, happiness was not a consideration for royalty. Duty, honor, and power were what mattered. Personal feelings were irrelevant. "I do not understand the question, Captain. I am the heir to the throne of 17 worlds. Happiness is not relevant to my position." Jake leaned forward. "But it's relevant to your life. When you wake up in the morning, do you look forward to the day? When you interact with people, do you enjoy their company? When you make decisions, do you feel satisfied that you're making things better?" Princess Lorelei considered these strange questions. Most of her days were filled with ceremonies, meetings, and formal duties. She spoke with advisors and courtiers, but never had real conversations. She made decisions based on tradition and political necessity, rarely considering whether they actually helped anyone. "I have never thought about such things. A ruler's personal satisfaction is not important." Maybe that's the problem. If leaders aren't happy, how can they make their people happy? If rulers don't enjoy life, how can they create conditions where others can enjoy theirs? Before the princess could respond, an urgent alarm echoed through the palace. Guard Captain Thexvar burst into her chambers without the usual formalities. "Princess, we have a situation. Rebel forces have attacked 3 government facilities in the outer districts. They're demanding immediate social reforms and threatening more violence if their demands are not met." Princess Lorelei rose immediately. "Summon the military commanders. Prepare for standard suppression protocols." "Wait," Jake said. "What are their specific demands?" Captain Thexvar looked confused by a human questioning military procedures. "The rebels want elimination of the caste system, elected representation, and economic equality. Standard treasonous demands." "Those don't sound like treasonous demands to me. They sound like people asking for basic rights." Princess Lorelei looked between Jake and her guard captain. Traditional Zephyrian response would be overwhelming military force followed by public executions to deter future rebellion. It was how the Empire had maintained order for centuries, but Jake's words from their earlier conversations echoed in her mind. Fear doesn't solve problems. Understanding does. Captain Thexavar, delay military deployment. I want to try something different. Princess, with respect, rebels only understand force. Negotiation will be seen as weakness. Jake stood up. Princess, what if we offered to meet with their leaders? Not to surrender to their demands, but to understand what's driving their actions. You suggest we negotiate with criminals? I suggest you talk to citizens who are desperate enough to risk their lives for change. That level of desperation usually means something is seriously wrong. Princess Lyra Lay made a decision that would have shocked her father and terrified her advisors. Arrange a meeting. I will speak with the rebel leaders personally. The meeting took place in a neutral location, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Princess Lyra Lay arrived with minimal security against the strong objections of her guards. Jake accompanied her as an observer. The rebel leaders were not what she expected. Instead of hardened criminals, she found teachers, engineers, medical workers, and skilled craftsmen. Their spokesperson was a middle-aged woman named Kira Vell, who had spent 20 years maintaining the palace's crystal systems before being demoted for suggesting efficiency improvements. Your Highness, we do not wish to destroy the Empire. We wish to serve it better. But the caste system prevents us from contributing our full capabilities. Princess Liralai listened as the rebels explained their grievances. Engineers forced to work as manual laborers because of their birth caste. Teachers prohibited from educating upper caste children despite superior qualifications. Medical workers denied access to advanced training that could save lives. Jake observed the princess during these testimonials. He could see her worldview changing with each story. She was beginning to understand that the rigid caste system wasn't maintaining order. It was wasting the talents and potential of millions of people. What specific changes do you propose? Princess Lyra Lay asked. The rebels presented a detailed plan for gradual social reform. They wanted merit-based job assignments, educational opportunities for all castes, and elected representation in government. They weren't demanding immediate revolution, but systematic change over time. Jake helped facilitate the discussion, not by taking sides, but by helping both groups communicate clearly. He asked questions that helped the rebels articulate their needs and helped the princess understand the practical implications of their proposals. After hours of negotiation, they reached a preliminary agreement. The Empire would begin a pilot program allowing limited social mobility based on demonstrated competence. In exchange, the rebels would cease violent activities and work within the system for further reforms. When Princess Lyra Lay returned to the palace, she faced immediate opposition from traditional courtiers. High Chancellor Vexitai was particularly vocal in his disapproval. Princess, you have shown dangerous weakness. Negotiating with rebels will encourage more uprisings across the Empire, or it will show that the Empire can change and adapt without losing its strength. Your father will never approve such reforms. Princess Lyralai straightened with new confidence. Then I will convince him that evolution is better than revolution. That evening, she requested a private audience with Emperor Zethkar. Jake waited outside the throne room as father and daughter discussed the future of their civilization. Lyralai, you ask me to overturn traditions that have maintained order for millennia. I ask you to consider that order based on fear is fragile. Order based on willing participation is unbreakable. These are human ideas, not Zephyrian ones. These are good ideas. Does it matter where they come from if they make our people stronger and happier? Emperor Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. You have changed, daughter. There is something different in your voice. I have learned the difference between commanding obedience and earning loyalty. Jake Morrison showed me that true leaders serve their people, not the other way around. The Emperor looked at his daughter with new eyes. For the first time in her life, she was speaking with passion and conviction rather than dutiful compliance. Very well. We will try your experiment. But if these reforms lead to chaos, we will return to traditional methods. Princess Lirelei felt a surge of hope, unlike anything she had ever experienced. Thank you, Father. I will not disappoint you. As she left the throne room, she realized that Jake had been right about something else. For the first time in her life, she was genuinely happy about the work she was doing. Leading through service instead of dominance wasn't just more effective, it was more fulfilling. 6 months had passed since the historic negotiations that changed Zephyrian society forever. Princess Lirelei stood in the same palace gardens where she had once walked with Jake Morrison, but everything looked different now. The maintenance. Workers no longer kept their eyes downcast when she approached. Instead, they greeted her respectfully and often shared suggestions for improving the gardens. The pilot program for social reform had exceeded everyone's expectations. Citizens given opportunities to advance based on merit rather than birth caste had shown remarkable innovation and dedication. Agricultural productivity had increased by 30%. Medical advances had reduced disease rates across all social levels. Educational programs had discovered brilliant minds in the most unexpected places. But the success had also created new challenges. Traditional nobles viewed the changes as threats to their inherited privileges. They whispered that Princess Lirelei had been corrupted by human influence and was weakening the empire's foundations. Jake Morrison had returned to human space after helping establish the reform programs, but he maintained regular communication with the princess through diplomatic channels. Their conversations had evolved from formal exchanges between species representatives to genuine friendship between two leaders facing similar challenges. On this particular morning, Princess Lirelei received disturbing news. A coalition of conservative nobles led by Duke Zarnthul had formally challenged her right to inherit the throne. They claimed she had violated ancient traditions and brought dishonor to the royal bloodline. High Chancellor Vextai, who had gradually come to support the reforms after seeing their positive results, brought her the official challenge documents. Princess, they demand a formal hearing before the Grand Council. You will need to defend your leadership philosophy and justify the changes you have implemented. Princess Lirelei read through the charges, consorting with inferior species, elevating lower castes above their natural station, undermining imperial authority through collaborative governance. The accusations would have terrified her 6 months ago. Now they only strengthened her resolve. Schedule the hearing, Vextai. It's time the Grand Council heard from the people these reforms have actually helped. The hearing was set for 1 week later. Princess Lirelei spent the time preparing not with legal arguments or political maneuvering, but by visiting communities throughout the capital city. She spoke with former lower caste workers who had advanced to positions of responsibility. She met with families whose children now had access to advanced education. She listened to stories of hope and opportunity that would have been impossible under the old system. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison received urgent communication from Princess Lirelei explaining the situation. Without hesitation, he requested permission from Earth Command to attend the hearing as an official diplomatic observer. Admiral Hayes approved the mission immediately, recognizing the strategic importance of supporting their new Zephyrian allies. The day of the hearing arrived with great ceremony. The Grand Council chamber was filled with nobles from across the empire, many of whom had never seen a human before. Duke Zarnthul presented his case first, arguing that Princess Lyrale's reforms threatened the natural order that had made the empire strong. The caste system exists because it reflects natural hierarchies.